The idea of shutting it down just feels like failure. It's a stomach punch. It's like you've worked this long, this hard for what? To shut it down?
He was the agency. 10 years, countless clients, his identity stitched into every deliverable. So when the tide turned, he saw something no one else did.
You go back to almost those conversations about, well, what's our beliefs? Like, what are we working towards? What's the point of all this? You're always trying to achieve that. And then when you file your taxes, you're like, my goodness, how did we even make money on this? I remember having a pretty tough week. There was 2 clients that let us know they were going to cut budgets. And they were 2 pretty significant clients. I remember going downstairs, logging into the bank accounts, okay, like, what do we have left? Do I have enough to pay my people?
You see all the glamour, the upside, the freedom. There's a cost associated with that.
At some point you realize, okay, you hit these sort of milestones where this just got a lot easier. That was very transferable to my rent-own business. I could do rent-own here in Cornwall. The home prices make sense. The ratio of home prices to rent makes sense. There's enough people that make enough money for this to work. It was the first time I didn't log into my laptop on a vacation, like first time in 10 years. I'm starting to reap the rewards of running a business. I'm starting to get my time back.
Just because something worked and has been working doesn't mean it's going to work in perpetuity. You don't need to service everybody. In fact, it's beneficial for you to be turning people away.
Holy crap, did we just buy a money pit? Was this the dumbest thing we could have done?
Sometimes in business, the answer isn't to continue scaling. It might just be to walk away. David Pereira built and exited a successful marketing agency, and the way he navigated that exit with clarity, with numbers, and with options is something every entrepreneur should pay attention to. Now, in this episode, we talk about how real estate gave him leverage, why risk management is the foundation of every deal he does, and the systems that he brought from the agency business into real estate. Now, if you're building, burning out, or trying to buy back your time, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Can you tell us about what your life was like leading up to your real estate journey?
So the real estate journey started probably in 2012. So I was mid-30s, early 30s back then. I had been aware of real estate as a means to create wealth, but I hadn't really delved into it. I think I knew that certain areas, hey, if you buy a condo, or I think I heard the stories, hey, you buy a condo now, this thing will go up in 50% in 2 years. You can speculate, you can make fast money. So I had heard some stories. I hadn't read or hadn't really educated myself for a long period of time. And that in 2012 was kind of the inflection point for me. That's when I attended a RAIN meeting. So RAIN, Real Estate Investment Network, Don Campbell's organization. I'm not active with them anymore, so I'm not entirely sure kind of what they're doing now. But back then, it was a phenomenal source of education. Don Campbell wrote a lot of great books for kind of the mom and pop real estate investor. And one weekend, I decided to go to one of their boot camp conferences. And I remember there was probably about 500, 600 people there in this convention center, whole series of speakers. And it sort of opened my eyes because at your table, there was 10 people or so. And the people came from all walks of life. Like there were some people who were just really dressed up, quite like suit and tie and seemed very professional. Others seemed like they woke up that morning and decided to go to a conference. And then you talk to people about their experiences and you kind of realize, hey, the most sort of nondescript person right now is managing 10 properties and they've been doing it sort of slowly over a period of time.
Yeah.
You realize that a lot of people had sort of taken action. You also talk to some people who have been attending conferences for years but didn't do anything with the information. So there's a lot of a variety of people there. And I remember this one exercise we did was imagine your Belize, B-E-L-I-Z-E, the country. And apparently this is from a story of this guy who's like, hey, this is where I want to go. This is kind of my utopia. And what do I need to do to get there? And what does there look like? Yeah. So really, I think it was sort of an exercise in future visualization. And I remember writing down these notes about my Belize in terms of what good life look like 10 years, 20 years down the road. And I still have a digital version of that note, my Belize, in my Evernote. It's still something that I look at every now and then. I remember also at that conference there was a guy beside me who had not started yet, but he and I were sort of like, you know what, let's do this. And his name is Chris Hook. He is now a successful realtor based in Hamilton. And I've had my own varying levels of action and success. So it was interesting. We weren't really accountability partners, but over the years we've kept in touch with each other and sort of taken interest in each other. And so yeah, 2012 was that inflection point, and then 2013 was my first purchase, which was a triplex in Hamilton, and that's what got the ball rolling.
Got it, got it. And after that first purchase, where were you at? Were you like, you know what? I want to take this and I want to run. I found, proof of concept. It's not just doable for others, it's doable for me. I have the ability to make this work. What did that look like for you initially?
So at a high level, I think it's kind of what you just said, El Ray. Is like, hey, other people can do this. I've talked to people with 5 doors, 10 doors, 50 doors. Hey, imagine the cash flow if I had 50 doors. So I think there was this high level goal of accumulation and getting to a point where I could support myself with cash flow.
Yeah.
But I think when you're in that first triplex that was my fiance at the time and I bought, we didn't know what we didn't know. So I had done enough to feel confident that, okay, let's just move forward and we'll figure the rest out. So I think we were educated to some degree, but we didn't have the practical experience. And so we wound up buying our first triplex, which was a 100-year-old place in Hamilton, which comes with all the problems that a 100-year-old house comes with. So when we went for the inspection, there was all these things I hadn't heard of that were problematic.
Yeah.
And I remember we worked with our realtor, and I think we wound up getting like $9,000 back to do the repairs. We wound up placing tenants, and then we wound up having a bunch of repairs along the way. So I remember my fiance, then wife, was concerned the entire time. Holy crap, did we just buy a money pit? Like, was this the dumbest thing we could have done? In the back of my head, I'm like, I felt confident we had done the right work in terms of picking the right market. We picked Hamilton, which we knew back in 2013 there was still plenty of upside.
Yeah.
A good area in Hamilton. It was a triplex. Assuming everything went well and normal, it was very cash flow positive. So I felt like we had the fundamentals correct.
Yes.
So I wasn't as pessimistic about her, but every time there was a bill for $5,000 because we had to fix this, or the fire department decided that, hey, we need now to like fix our basement. Someone complained, and so now we can put fire rated doors and do all these things that I was unaware of when we started this journey. You go through those moments of like, hey, what did we do? But as we saw the market grow over time, and then 6 years later, we sold it and it was basically twice the price we had bought it for. That moment in 2019 when we sold it was, I think, the aha moment for my wife, and her thinking, hey, maybe David's not such an idiot. Maybe we actually did something positive here.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a little bit of validation as well. But even before that 2019 mark, we wound up getting our second place, which was a duplex in Kitchener, because the market was growing. Personally, I would have loved to have done something every year, every 2 years. That was actually, I think, part of my plan. It financially wasn't always feasible, and also life gets in the way when I'm having kids and all that stuff. But it was always been in my head, okay, we need to just start smart accumulation. And my wife, once we made that sale in 2019, she was definitely on board with more actively. So yeah, you go through a variety of emotions. I think you have the high level goal, which is sort of the North Star. You're always trying to achieve that. But when you're in it and dealing with the problems, and then when you file your taxes at the end of the year and you're putting together the P&L to give to the accountant, and you're like, my goodness, like, look at all these expenses I had this year. How did we even make money on this? Or did we make money? You realize the reality of owning property and all the positive and negatives that accompany that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, no, I get that. There's like you mentioned, it's that North Star. So you have your compass, you know where you're going, but you think, did I take the right route here? Am I further back than where I thought I was? But you just keep going. So you had the initial proof of concept. You built more conviction as you guys moved along, which is basically how it goes. And after that point, how did things progress? What was sort of the next steps for you guys?
Sure. So like I said, 2019 was a big inflection point where my wife saw the money we'd made on that first condo. Sorry, the first triplex,
Yeah, yeah.
and it kind of got her excited because we both kind of realized, yes, there were issues over the course of those 6 years, and I had to deal with tenants every now and then. But really, it was probably the easiest money we made. Right? It wasn't 100% passive, and we did have property managers, but I don't know, the quality of them kind of varied throughout the time. But it wasn't really that hard. And when we saw the final, hey, we made this much, okay, let's do something else. And then, of course, COVID hits in 2020. So at this point, we have a lot of time on our hands. Early 2020, my wife and I sat down and kind of said, look, we've got some time. Let's figure this out. What do we want to start side businesses? Do we want to be doing something else? And I remember in 2020, I listened to this podcast and heard this woman talk about rent to own. Now, I had heard about the rent to own concept back in 2013 because the realtor I had worked with back in 2013, he literally wrote a book about rent to own. His name was Mark Loeffler, and I remember reading that book back in 2013. So I hear this podcast in 2020, and it kind of stirs up that that memory of the concept. And I've loved the concept because there's a win-win-win component to it. It's not about making the most money possible. It is about making sure all the stakeholders involved get their fair share and everyone gets what they want from it. And that aligns with my values. I very much love that concept. So I hear that podcast that night. I send a message to the woman who was on the podcast, and pretty soon, a partner and we've invested in a rent to own in Brampton. This is November 2020. So we start thinking about real estate also, and my wife's like, well, why don't I look at becoming a realtor? If we're serious about buying more real estate, well, if I become the realtor, that's going to save us just a little bit on the buy, on the sell. And we might get access to better deals and all these things, right? So really, she was a full-time teacher at the time, and teaching at home during the pandemic came with its own challenges, but she was home.
Yeah.
And she decided to get her realtor license through Humber College here in Ontario. And so she found that while she was going through that process, she liked it. She had always liked real estate from a design perspective, interior design. She liked the aesthetics of real estate. But getting into doing her license, I think, opened her eyes to all these other potentials.
Yeah.
And then in parallel, I really was interested in rent to own from, okay, I really like this concept. I remember getting on sort of the email list for the rent to own operator that we worked with, and you had to respond within 5 minutes in order to get the deal. Like, she would put out a deal to her base, and if you didn't respond quickly, you missed out. So that kind of spoke to me in that, okay, hang on, there's demand for this.
Yes.
Clearly, there's a lot of investors who like this concept. I love the concept. Based on kind of what I've done as an investor, I probably know 60% of what I need to know if I want to be the operator. Yeah. So then I wound up hiring a coach, and had the job for my coach was to fill in the gaps. What do I not know? What could go wrong? What are the risks? If my goal is to be a really good operator, I'm not trying to be a big scale business, but if I want to be a rent-own operator, what do I need to do to be really successful at this? And it was great. So each session was kind of very focused, and the gaps got filled.
Yeah.
And so the idea was my wife would become sort of the dedicated realtor for my rent-to-own business. And so we were hoping to work together as a tandem, and that's really what we tried to do. It didn't quite work out that way because I realized I cannot really do rent-to-own effectively in the GTA. So I live in Mississauga. Everyone knows home prices in the GTA are pretty inflated, and it's not a place where you can easily cash flow if you're doing 20% down. And if that doesn't exist, then it's not a good market for rent to own. So it quickly sort of dawned on me that, okay, I can't really do rent to own here. But my wife had started her real estate business, winds up getting a lead from a friend of mine, works on that deal, closes it, sells it, learns a ton through the process, and that ignited her passion for being a realtor. So now we're in 2021, 2022. She's working on her realtor business. I'm working on my rent to own business, so things were pretty happy, pretty busy in our household. I remember 2022, we're working in our office. We both sort of sit in the same office, and it was like midnight, 1 o'clock, and we're looking at each other like, what are we doing? Like, we have full time jobs, yet we're still up working on these side hustles. And then you go back to almost those conversations about, well, what's our beliefs? Like, what are we working towards? What's the point of all this? We're both I think driven people. We both want to succeed, but I think it's worth reminding what does success look like?
Yeah.
Reminding yourself, what does success look like? What are you working towards?
Yeah.
And that sort of realigned us, and we've just kind of been pushing forward ever since.
I love that. So you've highlighted that journey. So for your wife, when you guys got started with real estate, your wife was teaching at the time, and you guys sort of progressed. You grew your portfolio. You grew as investors, and then your wife transitioned over into getting the realtor's license. It's like, hey, this actually, I think I kind of found my calling here, and she took that and ran with it. What did that journey look like for you? Like when you got into your first rental, what you weren't doing real estate full time. Where were you at? What, like, career wise? What did
No.
that look for you, and how did that progress to date?
So back in 2013, when I started, I was working at a marketing agency. So there's a small marketing agency in the GTA. Most of our clients were in the US. So I was traveling for work, and it really was a full time job. 2015, literally 2 weeks after our first child was born, I get a call from the two partners of the agency. One was looking to leave, and the other partner basically wanted to give me half the company in a sweetheart deal if I stuck around. Um, uh, the partner who gave me that deal, he was the creative director, and he knew that I sort of had the business mind, so he wanted to kind of keep me and have me sort of run the business moving forward. So I took it because I'd always want to kind of run my own shop, run my own business. And here it was a business that I was very familiar with. I had gained a lot of the clients, I'd done a lot of consulting. So it just was a natural fit. So as of 2015, I was a business owner running a marketing agency. And that continued until 2024. I'm sure we'll get into that story in a second, but yeah, for 9 years, I was a full-time business owner. We had up to probably max of 10 staff, like 10 full-time employees, lots of contractors. So it was taking a lot of time, but the real estate sort of still happened in the background, right? So not the rent to own operating, but just our own sort of rentals. They still happened. They still cash flow. And it was just something we knew that was there. I think part of what we always sort of dreamed of was we were going to have these two houses for our two daughters. I think in terms of like what does good look like or what does success look like,
Yeah.
we had bought a couple places earmarked for our daughters because who knows what the future looks like in the GTA for kids that are currently 7 and 10 years old. I don't know how easy it is for them to buy a house in the future. So we were trying to do our best to give them at least a bit of a head start when it comes to that. So yeah, all that real estate stuff kind of happened in the background, and that's something we had I'd read about and heard, right? Like if you're truly a passive investor, it should happen in the background. Yes, there's gonna be some stuff you have to do once in a while, but overall, it shouldn't be your primary job, and that's really what life was like for up till like 2021 or so.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, no, 100%. And it has gotten harder and harder over the years to get into home ownership. So who knows what that looks like in the future. But I love the fact that, you highlighted you not just your real estate journey, but how things were going when you guys got started initially as well, because outside of the entrepreneurship investor circles, people are always speaking about, hey, you need to find some form of balance. And yes, I get that, and I am a believer in that. But there's another thing as well. It's like you go through phases and stages. And the way I personally see it is initially when you're getting started, you're trading time for money until you get to the tipping point where you can start trading money for time. And then you get time back. And then it becomes a lot
Yep.
easier to get a little bit more balance in your life. But there kind of has to be a little bit of imbalance. And so that's why I love the fact that you highlighted, a snapshot of you guys working till like 1 a.m. in the morning. Now, some of it comes through just passion, enjoying what you're doing, enjoying the progression,
Sure.
enjoying the grind. And I mean, that state of flow is always an ideal state to be working from. But I like highlighting that because, yes, real estate is the upside is fun, and, growing financially is fun. But there's struggles and there's sacrifices and work that gets put into it, oftentimes behind the scenes, that doesn't always get highlighted by people. So I love like highlighting both sides of the coin there. Now, you were in a marketing agency. What did running the agency reveal to you about the kind of business you wanted to build for the long term? Whether this is within real estate, within marketing, just like for like getting that
Yeah,
experience from 2015, what did things sort of evolve into, like, hey, this is what I want to build to within the next couple of years, and this is where I wanna sort of direct my life towards.
sure. So with the marketing agency, truthfully, I didn't have an exit strategy. I didn't really know how this was going to end. I think I had hoped that I'd be able to sell the agency at some point, and sort of take a nice fat check, probably put in a couple of years to make sure the business transitions, and then I'd figure it out. Um, in those years while I was growing the agency, it was kind of like what you mentioned, El Ray. You're sort of just working sort of thanklessly and just grinding it so that things will become easier.
Yeah,
The time for money exchange is 100% true,
yeah,
right? And then at some point you realize, okay, you hit these sort of milestones where this just got a lot easier. Like, we were able to convert this client with way less effort, and we got paid 5 times more than that client 2 years ago. Because you start just getting enough reps, you're just so much more familiar with the situation, and all of a sudden your business kind of takes off because you've laid all this foundation, and you've got all these templates set up and all this process set up, and things are just easier. And I think learning about the foundations and learning about what foundationally you need to have a base level of success and to
uh-huh,
make life easier, or work easier, that was very transferable to my rent-own business. It's
yeah,
also been transferable to my wife's business, in terms of her real estate. So just very quickly, with her real estate business, so if you go to your left next neighbor on one side, the neighbor on the other side, chances are one of them is a realtor, because there are way too many realtors in the GTA.
yeah,
And the question, so I come from a marketing background, or marketing and sales background. And the question I kept on asking my wife was, why would anyone choose you to sell their home? You are a new realtor. Why is anyone going to give you their $1 million or $2 million house? Like, what's the justification for that? And at first she was offended, when I asked that
yeah,
question, because she thought I was being a bit of a jerk. And I probably was, the way I framed it. But I think she saw the truth behind that question, right? Put yourself in the shoes of your audience. Like, what if they're a rational audience? Like, how are they going to evaluate you?
yeah,
And then she started doing some deals and realized she had a real passion for working with seniors. So it naturally occurred or evolved because she worked with a couple of seniors. And when seniors are downsizing, they go through sort of a very transactionally, they're selling a home and buying something else, but all the details surrounding it are very different. You have to manage the various family members. Their home has, they've lived in their home for 40 years.
yeah,
Their 1970s carpeting is probably still there. It may not show well for staging. There's all these things you have to manage. Their energy levels, when it's coming time to like dealing with stuff, like their energy levels vary, and you have to accommodate that.
yeah,
My wife, being a teacher, found she had all these transferable skills. And so she's really good at dealing with, let's say, the front end. She's great at dealing with the clients, great at the negotiations, all those things. Where I'm helping her is that foundation layer.
yeah,
So I'm helping with the process, the operations, putting together content, putting together like all these different things so that she's got a foundation to grow her business. And when I sit there and work on it, I'm sometimes surprised how much of my old world or my old business is transferring to this.
yeah,
But I think maybe that's just the nature of small business, is you need to have some level of foundation so that it gives you credibility, it gives you some sort of steadiness that you can always refer to. It also kind of gives you a level of professionalism. At the end of the day, you don't want to look like you're just making it up for the first time. Clients can see through that. And once you have process, once you have templates, once you have sort of a roadmap on how you do things, clients feel that comfort level and feel that confidence, and they're confident in you. So I've been working with my wife on that for her business. I've been doing that for my rent-to-own business. And it's funny how all that is sort of transferring from my world 10 years ago.
Okay, so I quickly have to stop here. We lost the footage going forward due to some technical issue. We weren't able to acquire it. However, for those of you watching, there's a nice little surprise where we've changed both myself and David into baby versions of ourselves, finishing the rest of the episode. And for those of you who are just listening on the go, there won't be any interruptions. We have all the audio footage of the rest of the podcast, so enjoy. Oh, yeah, 100%. And I'm fascinated by that because people don't realize there's skill sets that you acquire through your experience that you can stack on as things progress. You may not see value in what you're doing right now or the 9 to 5 you're working right now, but guaranteed when you transition into something else, and ideally something you're a little bit more interested in, there are skill sets that you could use from that. And
Yep.
as you mentioned, when you work in a smaller organization, whether it's a startup or whatever it is, the one other thing is you're wearing multiple hats. So there's multiple different roles, so you're getting experiences on multiple different levels. The nice thing for you guys, though, is that you guys complement each other. You bring different skill sets to the table, and I think your wife really benefited from that, especially with your marketing background. It helps you think about what's my value proposition, what's my ideal clientele, which is really hard for people to figure out initially, especially if they don't have that guidance, so they're not even thinking about that. It's like, hey, I want to service everybody. I'm a realtor. You want to buy, you want to sell. I want to work with all of you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And really dialing that in, dialing your message in,
Yep.
catering your service to specific target audience, all that actually really helps you explode and really grow your business. So thank you for sharing that. I fully see the progression and the value in that, and having each other to be able to complement on your different skill sets, I think is super beneficial. As you both run individual businesses, now going back to the marketing agency, so you got that experience, you started
Yep.
running the business, you became a partner, started running the business, and the plan was grind, get better at what you're doing so that you're starting to get a better ROI on your time, you're getting better conversion rates, things are going great, and you're thinking, okay, cool, eventually I'm going to make an exit from this, sell the company. What was the next steps? Did you know like what was in store for you? At this point in time, you already had a portfolio, you had some experience on the real estate side. Were you thinking, okay, similar to my wife, maybe I'm going to find like a symbiotic like business in the real estate side? There's this rent to own that you stumble across. Did you think, should I go full swing on the rent to own side? What was the plan for you going forward there?
So in 2022, 2023, rent to own, I think, felt like a side business because it was still a bit of a proof of concept for me.
Got it.
I wasn't sure how big I wanted to take the business, how big it could get. With respect to my marketing agency, I think I had reached a point though where I put in so many hours, put in the grind, I had grown it to a certain level, and now I had sort of a director of operations. And I was trying to find a way to kind of not make the agency about me, because I learned that if I was the central figure to the agency, that actually hurts the value and makes it harder to sell, right? What businesses are looking to acquire is a business. They're not looking to acquire the individual, because if I'm tethered to that business, well, then I'm stuck in the business. So I was actively working with my coach, my agency coach, trying to figure out how do I extract myself from the business and what are the steps I need to take in order to make my agency sellable. So I had started that. We had implemented all this process and all this a lot of change management, which is never easy when you're working with anyone, right? But my team kind of went through the rigors of like changing how we did things. And I was finding that life was getting a little bit easier for me in the sense, I remember taking a vacation 2023. We went to Cancun for a wedding, and it was the first time, I still took my laptop, but the first time I didn't log into my laptop on a vacation, like first time in 10 years. And so that felt good. It felt like, okay, you know what? I'm starting to reap the rewards of running a business. I'm starting to get my time back. And I found over the next little while, I was sort of taking the foot slightly off the gas to some degree because I was interested in real estate, interested in other things. But one other thing I noticed in 2023 or late 2023 was something's changing with the market. So we're now hearing from clients that, hey, things may not be they won't be giving the same commitments in terms of budgets for next year. They won't necessarily, they're starting to use AI a bit more. And then I started kind of reading more about this stuff in late 23, going to conferences in 24. And all these agency conferences were talking about AI and saying, like, how do you manage this with clients and like, what's going on? And I'm hearing that all these agencies are struggling to some degree. So then I'm like, okay, so then early 2024, mid 2024, I'm going through a process of trying to forecast for next year. And I'm talking to all these existing clients, and most of them are basically telling me, hey, you know what? We're going to be cutting our budget by 50% or 80%.
Yeah.
They're giving me at least a heads up that things are going to look ugly next year. So then I'm looking at, okay, well, what's my cost to run the business? If I had my payroll was by far my biggest component, but if I add all my cost components, can I even break even next year? And am I really in this to break even? Like, I'm going to be grinding to break even and to pay everyone else, but nothing for my family. That didn't make sense. Yeah. And then as I'm like, then it's okay. Well, where's the upside? Where's the downside? So the downside picture has been very accurately or very vividly painted. So I can see all the ways this goes south. I don't see all this ways this gets a lot better. Yes, we could pivot, but if we pivot, what's that pivot to? If we change the business, well, do I keep all the same staff? Do I need to hire new staff? What does that look like? So I went through this exercise for probably 2 months, and I was interviewing a bunch of people, talking to people in different industries, getting a sense of like, what are they seeing in the marketplace? And I concluded all those conversations sort of feeling even more pessimistic about the future as it pertains to the marketing agency. So I remember June. I remember having a pretty tough week. There was 2 clients that let us know they were going to cut budgets. And there were 2 pretty significant clients. And I remember, I'm usually a pretty even keel person, but that Friday I was just bummed. And I remember just like, my wife could tell, and we talked about it. And then we're talking till like early hours of the morning. She's like, why don't you just shut it down? And I kind of looked at her and like, what do you mean shut it down? She goes like, I can tell you don't love this anymore. And if you don't see the upside, like, what's the risk of shutting it down?
Yeah.
And in my head, like, I think most entrepreneurs, the idea of shutting it down just feels like failure. Yeah. It's a stomach punch. It's like, you've worked this long, this hard for what? To shut it down? She goes, look, you've supported our family for a long time with the profits from the business. So we've had a nice run. What's wrong with shutting it down? Like, it's not failure. Like, the business served its purpose. Yeah. And so I remember going downstairs, logging into the bank accounts. Okay, like, what do we have left? Do I have enough to pay my people if we have to go through severances and all that stuff? And literally that weekend, I kind of made the decision. Okay, it's time. I talked to a couple of other sort of mentors and whatnot, but by that Sunday, I was 99% confident, like, this was my decision. And it was like this massive burden was lifted off my shoulders. Once I made that decision in June to shut it down, I felt better. And that's pretty telling. Yeah. Like, I wasn't sort of, no, I can figure this out. I can do it better. No, I was ready to like shut it down. So then between June and August, I'm trying to work through all the details with kind of lawyers and HR and try like, what are the right ways to do this? So then I remember August 17th, it's the day I'm letting my team know. And I booked, typically we have our team calls on Monday. I think it was a Thursday morning, and I put an all hands meeting for like 9:30 or so. And I think my team knew, well, that's not good because David never does an all hands meeting. Yeah. But anyway, I get onto the all hands meeting, and I let people know, hey, I pre-wrote this speech because I did not want to wing this. It was too serious of a topic. So I wrote down this speech over the weekend, got ChatGPT to help. My wife edited it, and we kind of got it to a point where I was comfortable. So I launched into the speech. After the first paragraph, my Wi-Fi died. Ooh. And all of a sudden, we're on the Zoom call. I'm delivering the preamble to bad news, and my Wi-Fi craps out. Oh. And I'm getting all these like text messages from my team. Hey, what happened? Are you okay? So then I had to like tether my phone, get back on it in 5 minutes, and basically give the news that we're shutting down. And so, yeah, the goal was to kind of shut down by end of year, and kind of I had to have meetings with all the individuals, kind of work out severance packages. But basically, end of year was kind of when we stopped taking new business. I'm still doing a little bit consulting. I had to chase one of our clients for budget. We had done work, they hadn't paid. That took 8 months to collect because they got acquired by private equity, and we had to kind of go through this process to chase. I had to go figure out who the right person was. But anyway, finally got paid from them in May of 2025. And that's when I officially was able to shut down the business. Once I did that, I actually posted on LinkedIn to let people know, hey, here's what happened.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. I got a bunch of people reaching out to me, a lot of like really nice messages. But I also got a lot of business owners reaching out to me, especially agency owners who were feeling exactly what I was feeling. And they were like, your note resonated with me because I don't see the upside.
Yeah.
I'm going through the same sort of thought process you are. So I've been doing a sort of like these one-on-one counseling calls with some other business owners, kind of helping them just talk through stuff and providing advice where I can. But it was a pretty dark period. But what also allowed me to feel safe in the transition and in closing the business was real estate. So again, one of the things my wife and I talked about is, look, if we had to, we would sell a house.
Yeah.
If we really need to, if we're really pressed for income, we can sell a property. But there's nothing wrong with that. We have 5 or 6 properties. We can just do that. We have income coming in. You're growing the rent-owned business. So it was funny. I don't think we ever planned this to be the case. But in 2024, we were fortunate to have a real estate portfolio. Fortunate my wife had done the full transition from teaching to real estate with a focus on seniors. I started my rent-owned business and had done some deals now that we felt like, you know what, switching from a career to another career, which would be the second time for us, I guess, in the span of a few years, was a doable, viable option because real estate afforded us that opportunity.
What a journey. What a journey. But, while you're running me through this, like, I'm just thinking how smart that was. Like, your method of analyzing, trying to, running the numbers, predicting where things are progressing. Because just because something worked and has been working doesn't mean it's going to work in perpetuity, right? Like, people used to go rent movies from a store, and that was a fantastic business model until it wasn't. You know what I mean? So, if there's one thing that's guaranteed, it's change. Things are constantly changing.
Change.
Yeah. Being able to sort of forecast where are things evolving to? What does this business look like in the future? And then having your thoughts validated by the feedback you're getting from your current clients about their budget spend. And because AI is a disruptor. It's a big industry disruptor, and it's going to disrupt multiple different industries. I think having that insight to be able to analyze and think this through rationally, workshop it, and then go through the tough times. And I think not a lot of people highlight that enough. Like, there's a ton of hardship that goes with being an entrepreneur and being an investor. And, you don't get something for nothing. You see all of the glamour, you see all of the upside, you see all of the freedom, but there is a cost associated to that. And there's dark times associated to that as well, which only make you better for what's to come. So thank you for highlighting that journey. I really do. There's value in that. Now, from your entire experience on firstly, running the business, being specifically in marketing, when you made this transition and while you're making this transition, what are some key things that you're spotting as like, yep, skill set there, this is what I'm transferring over there. This is what I learned that I'm going to bring into the new business, or that I brought in, that sort of made, because you mentioned something like, which is so true. You feel like this is my child, this is something that I've taken and I've put time and effort, that I've grown and that has evolved into something. To just cut it loose and just shut it down does feel like a failure, right? But in hindsight, when you look years later and you look back, you're like, that was a fantastic stepping stone into the next venture, which helped set me up in multiple different aspects because I gained the skills that came with doing that. Looking back and like where you're currently at now, what are some things that are standing out to you as like, these are things that served me well, given the experience that I've gone through?
So first of all, your comment on stepping stone is 100% accurate. And you don't necessarily realize that in the moment because you're 100% in. You're all in on building that thing. So the thought of losing it, abandoning it not being there is a really odd feeling. And there's almost a feeling of loss. But then as you sort of step back and look at sort of the stepping stones you've had through life, I think as long as you're maintaining some level of curiosity, some level of growth, a desire to learn, everything sort of layers on top of each other. And now that I'm old, I'm 49, turning 50 next year, and I have enough experience to look back at all these different stepping stones, you sort of see, okay, everything sort of builds and builds and builds on top of each other. In terms of what I'm taking from the marketing experience and now layering into both my wife's business and my business, it's all over the place. So from a marketing standpoint, messaging, right? So who's our audience? What are we talking about? What are our themes? What are we known for? What do we do? What do we not do? Like from a product perspective, okay, let's define the product. I know real estate is a weird product, but ultimately, like as a realtor, like you don't necessarily think of it as a product, but there are some services that the average realtor does. Okay, so what are the services you're going to do? If it comes down to a bake-off and commission is at stake here, well, how are you showing your ability to be the better realtor for this person, for this particular client? Also realizing not every client is a good fit for you.
Yes.
So there's a product market fit is a big concept in tech, right? And that applies in real estate as well. You're not the right fit for every client. And sometimes it's okay to acknowledge that and say, you know what, we're probably not the right fit for each other, but here's a couple of realtors I think would be really good for you. So we've been going through a lot, like again, applying all that stuff from a sales marketing perspective and really sort of dialing in on our message. And we've used ChatGPT a lot. It's ironic that ChatGPT is probably, or AI is one of the reasons I shut down my marketing business, but my wife and I use it daily for our own businesses now. In terms of, we've set up our own GPTs, in terms of our messaging, in terms of the content we're producing, the blogs, the reels, like there's no reason not to use it. We probably use it for like the first 80-85%, and then definitely like do the edits and then clean it up and make sure it's in our voice and whatnot. So just having, again, all that foundational stuff. And really, again, my wife came from a teaching background. She didn't come from a sales and marketing background. And so some of this is just, that's second nature for me, is very new conceptually to her. And so talking through that and talking through it a couple of times and then kind of almost realizing she sees it and gets what I get. It's been really fun working together on that stuff. From a operations perspective, so the process, right? How do we do things? Okay, so from a pre-sales perspective, like how are we filling our funnel? What are the things we're doing? And even literally like mapping that out and like showing where all the inputs to our funnel. And then if they progress down, well, what do we want to say to them? How do you follow up with them? And then once you have a client and you're going through the process of helping them sell, okay, well, what are the stages? And we literally sat down and whiteboarded, okay, well, what does staging look like? What does decluttering look like? What does talking to the family look like? So we've gone through sort of all the whiteboard exercises that I've done as a consultant in my own business. And it's been fun doing that. And so now we've got all these like templates and tools, and we're using Monday.com, we're using MailChimp, we're trying not to be manual. We're trying to like run a business. So our goal for her business is to run it to the point where we can grow it, build a team, and eventually make that trade-off for time and money. Right now we're putting in the time. At some point, we'll be bringing in people and making that trade so that we can free up our time and still have the business grow. I'm doing the exact same thing with my rent-owned business. So I've spent a ton of time figuring out where the right market is, right? And it wasn't in the GTA, as I mentioned earlier. One of the markets I focused on was Cornwall, Ontario. The reason I chose that market was my wife grew up there. And we used to visit there for Christmas every year. And one day I saw a for sale sign. I just happened to check realtor.ca to see, okay, how much does this place cost? And my eyes bugged out when I saw it was less than 300,000. And I'm like, less than 300,000? Okay, hang on a sec here. So, then I checked probably Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, like, what's the rents? And the rent was like 2,000. So right away, I'm like, okay, so cash flow is definitely possible here. So we did a bit of analysis, and then we went to buying two places for ourselves. So we became landlords, we became property owners in Cornwall. As I'm placing tenants in those places, I'm seeing that these couples who are coming, each making $25 an hour. Cornwall has a bunch of distribution centers. So there's a lot of people making $23 to $28 an hour. And then when you come as a couple, okay, so you're making now combined $50 an hour times 2,000 hours, it's about $100K a year. If you have two kids plus Canada Child Benefit, your recognizable income for a mortgage is $120K. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me as I'm trying to place tenants on my own place that I could do rent to own here in Cornwall. The home prices make sense. The ratio of home prices to rent makes sense. There's enough people that make enough money for this to work. And then, as I learned with many small towns, like there's a ton of them that have bad credits. They just never learned how to manage money. And so, or they've never learned to save. So I wound up doing a lot of marketing in Cornwall. I did radio ads. I've got constant sort of Facebook messages and other channels, and I've sort of automated some of my Google forms and all of those things. And it's every day I get a sort of, or every couple of days I get a lead of someone combined 100K income. They don't quite have the savings yet. They need a couple more months to get to my $10,000 minimum, and they need some credit help. I can help those people,
Yeah.
right? So I can have a conversation with them. And if they're a good fit for me, great. If not, I can refer them to a credit specialist who I work with who can maybe help them short term, or say, you know what, your goal right now is to save an extra 5K the next 3 months to prove to yourself you can do this. Once you do that, get in touch with me, and then we can start talking about rent to own in earnest. It's funny, like that's literally how Cornwall became a market for me. And now we've done, I think, 10, 12 deals in Cornwall. I hosted sort of a realtor session a couple of months ago there. I think most of the realtors know who I am. I visit there like every 6 weeks to check in on our tenant buyers. So it's really funny how things come full circle. Literally, we're in Cornwall because my wife grew up there.
Okay. There's a lot there that we can unpack though. But just going back to what you first said there, you accidentally stumbled across this marketplace and you're like, the product can work here, like the strategy can work here, like the numbers seem like they can work. And then the second thing was, and I think that this is for any business, is there's two components to it. Like you have to find people who want the product or the service that you're selling, but also people that are able to buy the product or service that you're selling. Like wanting's not good enough, or being able to and not wanting is not good enough either. So that perfect combination. So you found people who are wanting your services, they're able, and the product or the actual strategy works in this marketplace, and you're like, perfect. We have the perfect storm here. Now I'm going to take what I know and now we're going to run with it. Now, for people listening, there's a bunch of golden nuggets that you've just left along the trail now, just as we've been progressing with how you started out to where you guys are currently at. Hopefully they're picking them up as you've been dropping them. But, there's a few things that just off the top of my head that I know that you mentioned is, and this has been through the realtor side for your wife as well as for yourself. I think it's transferable, it's universal. But there are investors out there that are listening that could get a ton of value from this, because marketing, regardless of the strategy, but for rent to own is a big aspect, right? Filling your funnel. You sort of relying on the tenant buyers, right? And that's what you need. And working with a ton of rent to own investors myself as a realtor, the biggest thing that separates the real successful ones from the ones who dabble in it really comes from a marketing standpoint. I'd say marketing as well as having your systems and your processes dialed in, because that gives you a little bit more scalability on the fulfillment side. It gives you higher conversion for all the leads that you're bringing in. But there's a level of marketing that I think a lot of people lack. So you have the skill set and, you've put it in place now. Before I get to asking you, hey, can you highlight for people listening out there, like just some key points that they need to focus on for these investors out there to really turn things up on the marketing side, regardless of the strategy? But if we want to keep it rent to own specific, we absolutely can. But, just off the top of my head, it's finding your value proposition for whoever your client is, whether it's as a realtor, whether it's as a rent to own operator, right? Because what separates you from the masses, and how are you going to help them? Who are those ideal clients? So having some qualifying factors, you mentioned that, and I don't know if people are picking that up. This is the ideal tenant buyer for you. It's this specific criteria. Maybe they're not quite there yet. Here's a process we can put them through to help bring them full circle so that they can be an ideal client. Maybe they won't get there, and that's absolutely fine. You need to be okay with that, and you can refer them to someone else who can help them. You don't need to service everybody. In fact, it's beneficial for you to be turning people away. Why? Because you could have one client that's just not the right fit. That takes up bandwidth for you being able to help 3 or 4 or 5 of your ideal clients. That's another thing you mentioned. I'm just listing like some of the nuggets that you've left along the way. There's a lot. People should probably re-listen to it if they haven't been picking them up by now. But I'll rather let you take the mic and just highlight some few key things that people can take from this, because people don't need to take 20 great points, but if they grab 1 or 2 or 3 good actionable things that can really move the needle for their business, then this episode was just completely worth their time. So if you could highlight a few for us, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So maybe one thing I try and do is come at it from, especially for my rent-own business, I come at it from a perspective of risk management. So real estate is beautiful when it works out the way you intend it. Like when the pro forma, the prospectus is how it works out, that's lovely. It just never happens that way.
Yeah.
So then the question is, what could go wrong and how do you manage against that? Like what's your mitigation strategy? If this happens, what are you going to do? If this happens, what are you going to do? So actually in the PowerPoint deck that I present to investors or even to tenant buyers, I have a list of like, hey, here's 8 things that could go sideways and here's how we will deal with it. So I think that's the first thing as an investor, because again, you're parting with your money or you're taking on someone else's money, which again, you don't want to apply undue risk to either of those. So you want to make sure that you're coming at it from a risk management perspective. I always tell that to my investors is, look, my job really is risk management. And the first risk that I need to manage is the tenants. So if I have really stringent qualification criteria and if they don't meet it, then if they're missing one criteria, maybe I'll talk to them and understand the story. But for me, it's a no until it's a yes.
Yeah.
I'd rather be quality than quantity.
Oh, yeah.
So what that means is everyone's a no. Every applicant for me is a no until it's justifiable to me that it's a yes. The way that I justify a yes is, number one, did they meet my criteria? Number two, when I talk to them, what's the motivation? Like, how do they get into their situation where this is something that they need for home ownership? Is there real energy behind them? Like, do I visualize this family doing the hard things to get to the finish line in 3 years? Have they shown an element of being able to sacrifice things? So once that kind of like that soft sort of touchy-feely stuff, which is incredibly important still, I'll check out their social media profiles. I'll look them up on LinkedIn. Like the job that they listed, is that legit? I'll do all those things. Once that passes the test, then I send them to a mortgage broker who does the real test of looking at their numbers. The same sort of paperwork that a family would have to give to a mortgage broker for a mortgage, he collects those same things and with permission does the hard credit pull. And he's going through that hard credit pull to figure out, why is their credit low? Is this a one-time event that was sort of explainable, or is there just a series or a pattern of misspending, mismanagement? Some of those things we can fix, some we cannot. And again, going back to sort of the values of your business, I don't want to leave anyone in a position where they're out of their life savings. I'm not going to take on a client who I think is not going to make it because that doesn't do anyone a service, right? So the investor doesn't really get the conclusion they're expecting, and the tenant buyer is set up to fail. So it makes no sense. In that situation, I'm much better off recommending them to a different service, giving them a book, sending them some YouTube videos, like whatever I think is useful to them, I'll try and do. I'm happy to talk to anyone for 15, 20 minutes and then give them something that hopefully they find useful. But like I said, it's a no until it's a yes for me in terms of accepting them as a client. And so really that's the first step of risk management, is knowing your criteria, sticking to the criteria. It's a no until it's a yes. And then once they're in, make it really easy for them to work with you. Set them up for success. Give them the templates, give them the tools, the tips, check in on them on a regular basis. When it's time for closing, so once the tenant buyer looks for their house, they find it, I've got all these checklists on a Google Doc, I share with them, I run over it. The contracts, I usually review with the tenant buyer 2 or 3 times because obviously there's real risks in there for the tenant buyer. I want to make sure they're 100% clear. I invite them to take it to their lawyer. So again, going back to the process, I've got all those process mapped out, but I'm also trying to make it really easy for my tenant buyers, for my investors, and even the realtors to work with me. So I will queue stuff up, set things up, I'll quarterback things, I'll be sort of like initiating the chat groups and making sure things are moving. Because I also want realtors to know that I'm going to work with them to make this successful. I'm going to push things where I have to push, ask the hard questions where I have to ask. And my job is to make things professional, move it forward, and make sure everyone succeeds. The other thing I've done in terms of like a compensation is most of my money is made at the end when we all close successfully. So we're all motivated to close successfully. At the end of the 3 years, that's when I get the chunk of my profit. The tenant buyer gets their house. The investor gets the biggest chunk of their profit. So we have our incentives aligned. And I think that's really important for any business, is what are the incentives for each of the stakeholders and when do they get distributed? Because if you have misalignment there, if someone gets paid too early, they easily can check out and move to the next thing. But if everyone's sort of getting their real reward at the very end, it gives motivation for all of us to get to the finish line.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. No, I fully agree with that. Going back to what you initially said as well as, like the risk mitigation side of things, it's so true. Whenever there's a reward, there's always a level of risk. And some people might say, real estate's not risky, or real estate is risky, or crypto's not risky, or crypto is risky, or stocks, or whatever it is. There's so many things that you could do. But when you flip it over, like, how do I fail? Or how do things go sideways? Cool. So these are the different ways things could go sideways. Now, what do I need to do to not have that outcome happen, or to lower the odds of that outcome happening? Or if for some unforeseen reason, one of these outcomes happens, what's the solution? How do we get out of that, right? So I love your thinking for that, right? Because it just reduces the risk massively. And then, to your last point there, having the compensation for all parties aligned just keeps that common goal for everyone. It keeps the priority there for everyone, and, creates for a smoother transaction. But yeah, there were a few things. Honestly, there were a few things you mentioned there. And then even going back to what you said earlier on with you whiteboarding things out, I just thought about that while you were speaking now, because operationally, there's all those different steps. And there's a big value in actually taking just the time, like the mental energy to really just map out what the entire operation looks like and really breaking it down. Because you said something that you could find ways to make the process more efficient and easier for all parties involved. And that in itself is a huge value add. If you think about it from a realtor perspective, if your clients don't have to ask what's next, or keep asking questions because they feel like they're in the dark, that's in itself is a huge value add. So if you've taken the whole process and you've really broken it down and you fully understand it, and you figured out, how do I make this process more efficient? How do I make this process clearer for all parties involved, easier? How do I reduce friction, taking them from point A to point B? And you fully understand it. You figure out checklists to put in place. You figure out like SOPs, standard operating procedures, what needs to happen. And operationally, you create a lot more efficiency, taking them across the bridge. So when you were speaking, it just brought me back to that thing you mentioned of like just whiteboarding it all out. I think that's a big value add for a lot of people who are investors, entrepreneurs, whatever. It's like just really expand out on that, and you'll start to see where there's blank spots. You'll start to see where there's holes in your bucket, where you could be losing people. Yeah, this has been a super, super, super insightful conversation. I really wish we could keep it going. For our listeners out there, it really doesn't have to stop here. I'm going to leave all of David's information in the show notes below. As you can tell, David's come a long way from where he started, but there's a lot left in front of him. Like you could even say the journey has just begun. So given that his progression to this point, I'd encourage you guys to go follow him so you can see how things keep progressing. But David, this has been a lot of fun. It really has been a lot of fun. I'll leave all your contact info in the show notes below, but I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm happy to talk to anyone. If I can lend any useful advice or a listening ear, I'm happy to do so. And Elray, thank you for making this a really easy podcast. Obviously, you're well prepared. You've obviously done some digging and know my background, and you've made it very easy to work with you. So thank you.
To our listeners out there, if you're looking for more valuable insights, be sure to subscribe. Share this with someone who can benefit. And as always, keep investing smartly. Thank you for tuning in to the Wealth Through Real Estate Show. If you want to master the art of finding great tenants while scaling your rental portfolio, you don't want to miss my episode with Garnet Correa. This is your host, Elray Noble, signing off.